Okay.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much, dear Julia, for your time and for all your books. I'm really, very excited to talk with you because, as you see, I have the new edition.
Aren't they so beautiful?
Yeah, it's really, really nice.
I love that one so much.
Yeah, and I love the colors and the vibe, because I think also, even though it doesn't look very much, it gives you a little bit about each of the books, like this little view about what it is. So I'm pretty excited about this new edition of your 9 books, which is great. And I was thinking, like, the first question that I would like to ask you is, what do you think we are get so excited about romantic novels in the 21st century, where it's supposedly we are already independent and we are already want more freedom, and we don't need those things because we are already super efficient for ourselves?
Well, you can still be independent and strong and your own person and still want a partner and want to fall in love. I think that's a very natural thing. And sometimes people say, how can you be a feminist and write romance novels? And I was like, well, isn't feminism all about our choices? Personally, I choose a career, but I also choose to get married and have a family. I mean, these are just things that I want out of life. And it's not anti-feminist to want one or the other or both. And so I think that, just because we want to live our lives in a certain way now, it doesn't mean we can't enjoy stories about other things. I mean, that's just crazy. And the thing about the books that are set in the Regency, or as I often explain it to people, the Jane Austen time period, because that's what people tend to know, is that it's got a little fairy tale quality to it. And we like fairy tales, and we like, romantic fantasy and escape, even if it's not what we would want. And I always tell people, I wouldn't want to live then. I wouldn't want, for one thing, if I lived then, I probably wouldn't be as rich as the Bridgertons and have that many, so that would be tough. But women, we had far less power and agency, and I want my vaccines, I want my antibiotics, I want all that. I want my indoor plumbing, but it's still really fun to read about and to watch on TV, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I was just talking with some friends, and I think that one thing about Jane Austen, we love Jane Austen and we love the characters and everything, but I think all the time we feel a little bit frustrated because we want to know a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And as she writes in that time, she was not able to give us that little more. And with you, it's like, yes, I have the little more. I want to ask you, how is to write that little more?
How is it to write? I'll be honest, it's not my very favorite part of the writing process. I really like writing the dialogue and the conversations, which is probably why in my books, in the sex scenes, people are always talking, which kind of make it like, for me as a writer, more fun and interesting to do. But, it's interesting because I think that an intimate relationship between partners is a big part of any romantic relationship. And so I think leaving it out, it just, you feel like if you're reading a romance, you often can feel like you're missing out on something, because that's part of how people relate to each other and how they feel. So, I'm glad that we can do that. I think we'll leave it at that. That's probably
because I also I read some of your other interviews, and I found out that you were going to a very different path, and suddenly it was like, oh, I'm going to start to do this as a way to distress and everything, and suddenly it became your career. I was wondering, your family, what did they tell you? How was that step to say, like, okay, I'm going to quit this and I'm going to become a writer, full-time writer?
Well, my family's always been very supportive. I mean, it probably helps that it wasn't like I was like, so I went to medical school, but when I decided to leave medical school, I already had 3 books published. So I think it would be a little bit different if I said, I'm quitting medical school, I'm going to try to write a book. I mean, I had already kind of proven myself. So I knew that I could make a career out of it. Maybe not the career that I've ended up making, but I knew I could do something. And, you know, in my family, they want me to be happy and fulfilled. And that was clearly the better choice for me. But at the same time, I'm happy and they're also happy that I tried medical school. Because what if, you know, if I never tried it, I might always be like, well, I wonder if I'd done that instead. So it worked out pretty well, but they've always been very, very supportive. And especially because my husband is a doctor. So I know exactly what I'm missing. Exactly. And I definitely have the better deal. Coffee let? Oh, I do.
I think that's really great, because sometimes as we are young and everything, we have this thing that you have to choose your path and you have to follow it and you have to follow your dreams. And suddenly some things came around and we try to, no, the important thing is this, and try to have another options, another paths is kind of difficult sometimes for, especially I think young women that, for instance, in medical school, who is very hard to get in because you have to study a lot and you have to do a lot of things besides your own career. I think it's kind of difficult to have that choice, but I think also it's very inspiring to see people like you to have like, okay, I have done it, and supposedly I will be very happy, but actually I decide this other path, and it has been really, really great. How do you feel 21 first years after you write the first Bridgerton? Well, you published the first Bridgerton, to see them alive in a very different media?
It's, you know, it's crazy. I mean, one thing that's funny is people ask me all the time, like, well, tell me about how you thought of the Bridgertons. And I'm always saying, I don't remember. I mean, I don't remember that moment of being like, oh, I could write this family. But, you know, I did live with that family. I mean, because I wrote so many books in a row, I think it was a good like 6 or 7 years of my life. That's all I was writing. So I was very involved in it. And I think what's the strangest part, it's not so much seeing the characters brought to life, because I'm not actually a very visual writer. And, you know, I'm friends with a lot of different writers, so I'm very aware of the fact that every writer is different. The way that we approach writing, the way that we think about it, what we have in our head. And when I'm writing, I don't have pictures of people in my head. I just don't. And in some ways, maybe that makes it easier for me to see my book adapted, because, you know, they can say, here's the cast, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's exactly right. You know, because I didn't have another idea. The crazy thing, well, there's 2 crazy things. The first one I discovered before it came out. And that was when I went to visit the set and I realized how many people were involved in the project. That was nuts, because the thing, when you write a book, it's the most solitary of art forms. It's just you, and then eventually your editor. And I like to think that once you publish it, it belongs to your readers too, in a way, but it starts out really just you. And suddenly I'm on this film set, and there are hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, there's the people you see, the actors, and you're probably like, oh, well, there's a director, but I mean, there are the makeup people and the guys serving coffee and the lights, and there are all these people running around looking very busy, and I have no idea what they're doing. So that was really crazy, just to see how big it was. And then after it came out, I mean, I always thought it would do well. I wasn't worried. I didn't think it was going to be a flop, but I didn't imagine this. I don't think anybody imagined how big it got. And suddenly it's in the, we use a word in English called zeitgeist. Do you use that?
No.
Oh, it's actually a German word that we use in English. Zeitgeist. It just sort of means, it's like it's in the air, it's in the pop culture, it's in the you know, it's now part of society. You know, and like, you know, suddenly the late night talk show hosts are making jokes about Bridgerton. And here in the United States last week, there was, this still blows my mind, the NFL, for the American Football League, they did like this really funny video where it was like Lady Whistle Down, but instead they called her Lady Whistle Blown. Did you see that?
No, but I read about it, and I
Yeah.
think that it's
If you go to my Facebook page and scroll back, I posted it last week. And so it's Lady Whistleblown narrating the draft, which is when the teams pick their players, and they had all the players like as the debutantes. And that's just, I called my dad and I said, I never thought I would be culturally relevant to the NFL. I mean, that's just, what? You know, so that's just, you know, I think it's just even weirder than the fact that, you know, these people are now playing these characters and that all these people have watched it. The weirder part is that it's now become part of the cultural conversation and it's popping up all over the place. You know, I hear about, you know, the Humane Society of whatever, you know, has a new litter of puppies and they name them after the Bridgerton. Something they're like, adopt Penelope, adopt Daphne. And, you know, it's amazing. It's just amazing.
I think is really, really great, because I think a lot of people who will not say that like this kind of romantic novels, now they are allowed to say it. And it's more open to talk about this kind of readings that I think here in Mexico, we have it too in a different way. I think we have it more in soap operas and other authors that they were from the 60s, the 70s. And we have these stories that have been with us for a very, very long time. And also there is another author in Spain that is called Corín Tellado, which is the second most reading Spanish author in the whole history. Wow. I mean, she wrote something like 5,000 novels or something like that. She was very, very profound.
Cervantes or something? Is the first one Cervantes?
Yeah, and she's super famous, but they were like this kind of hidden lectures, readings, like you had it in your magazine and you will not say that you were reading, but everyone will do it, even though I think even though men who says they do not read it, but they like just seeing it beside. But all the thing is also about the reading, the importance of the reading and the republishing. And you became #1 again after 21 years. And how did you feel about to become again #1 with a novel that you already wrote for a very long time?
You know, it's great. I don't know how else to say it. It's really great. And, you know, I feel like every day something happens that I'm smiling so hard, I just start laughing. I mean, because we can't believe it. You know, every day I'm like, well, here's today's piece of good news. And, you know, it's really kind of fun because, you know, especially the world is such a mess right now. My husband, who's a doctor, as I mentioned, he's actually an infectious disease specialist.
Okay. So I can imagine.
This has been just a brutal year for him. You know, so every day he comes home and poor guys, he's exhausted. And, you know, and I'm just like, I'm like, oh, guess what happened today in Bridgerton world? You know, it's like, I'm getting translated into Albanian or something like that. And so it's really nice for him because he's just, you know, he's been dealing with people just dying and horrible politics here, you know, just, you know, people who won't wear their masks or whatever. And, you know, and he gets to come home and I'll be like, you know, and today in Bridgerton land, another great thing happened. So it's been great. I mean, it's funny, how do you feel? I'm like, yeah, it feels great. It feels amazing. It really does. And, you know, I can't wait for, you know, the world to get back to normal or to the new normal so I can enjoy it a little bit more. I've actually, here's part of my secret. A lot of my books have been written in large part in Mexico. Yes.
Amazing. We are your inspiration. That's great.
Yeah. So we have a place we go to in Nuevo Vallarta. And I go, you know, when we can travel, we usually go several times a year. We go part of the time as a family and part of the time I go all by myself. And I just write and I get so much done. And I get there and the people are like, why are you working in Mexico? And I'm like, well, I have to work somewhere. I might as well do it here where it's so nice. And I have this beautiful view of the Pacific Ocean and people are bringing me guacamole and drinks. And so I go down in normal years, I spend at least, I'd say 2 to 3 weeks by myself in Mexico, writing. And it's like one of my favorite places to go. And I miss it so much. I can't even tell you.
We can imagine, because we miss also the beach and all that kind of things. Even though here in Mexico, we have this very lazy politics about everything that it's very strange. But another question that I have to ask you, that I know that someone should not ask, because it's like, you cannot ask who is your more loved character. And I guess that I have to ask you, which is your favorite character of the Bridgertons, and which one is the book that you were like totally enjoy, or you have like the most fun with it?
Well, I don't have a favorite Bridgerton. I mean, maybe Violet. Maybe because I relate to her more now that I'm older. Now, when I was writing the books, I was closer in age to the kids, but now I'm a Violet. In fact, on my Netflix, you can now pick Bridgertons to be your icons when you watch Netflix. I have Violet for me. And I also love Lady Danbury, because she says all the things I wish I could say. In terms of the books, I'm trying to remember which one was a favorite. Like, I tend to remember more of the parts that were hard. Like for Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, I can tell you that was really hard, because it was the first time I'd ever written a book where I had two characters who I'd already established. Usually you write, you bring in a character who everybody knows, and then you sort of figure out what you're going to do with them, and then you can bring in a brand new character and do, but this time I had two characters, so I'd come up with the story, and then, oh, that won't work because Penelope, blah, blah, blah. And then you come up with this, oh, that won't work because Colin already said this. And excuse me. So that was hard that way. I remember It's in His Kiss being really fun to write, which is funny because I actually started out and wrote about 50 pages and then completely trashed it and started over. But once I got going on that one, that was a lot of fun, just because there are a lot of capers and they're searching for these jewels, and it was just, that one was fun.
I have to ask you also, because sometimes we have this idea that the book is like, oh, it's already finished, this story, and you leave it like that. But actually, the book that I took is the Bridgertons After. And I think that is a very nice way to close that chapter of the Bridgerton. How did you became with the idea to do this final chapter for them?
Oh, so that I do remember. So what happened was, I started getting questions from readers about certain things, and they would say, they would write to me and things that hadn't even occurred to me. I think it was actually for It's in His Kiss was the first one that really started getting to me. I finished the book, and I loved the ending of that book. I thought it was perfect. Have you read it?
No, I haven't. I'm in the second one.
Well,
no, but continue, because I have read all the reviews, so I know.
Okay, so spoiler. So the whole book, Hyacinth is looking for these jewels that are hidden away, these diamonds, and she never finds them. And the epilogue of the book, in the book, not the second epilogue, her daughter finds them. And it's like, but she doesn't know that her mom's been looking for these, and she finds them, and then she puts them back. And that's how it ends. And so, I thought that was perfect. I love that. I love that happened to Hyacinth. Oh my gosh. I heard a lot of people thought it was perfect, but I heard from so many readers being like, what? How could you? She has to find those. She's been searching for them. How could you do this? What happened? And I was like, well, the book's over. I don't know, and I would get questions, and they'd be like, well, does this character ever get pregnant? And does this happen? And what was in those letters from Simon's father? And I would say, I don't know. And they'd say, what do you mean you don't know? And I'd say, well, I finished the book. I don't know. And I don't really go back to the characters unless I need to include them in a later book for some reason. And some of my readers were very upset about this, actually, because I think they think, I think about them all the time, but I actually, I close my computer and I go watch TV. I don't live and breathe them constantly. And so it's like, well, you have to figure out what happens. And so it just came as I started realizing I had, a number of books that people were asking these questions about. Not every book, but a number of them. I was like, well, we could actually do this thing with second epilogues and extra story after the story. And it was actually a tough sell at first because nobody had really done anything like that. And they came out originally in the United States as ebooks, but ebooks were very, very young at the time. And so nobody, like, everyone like, what's an ebook? Do I print it? How do I do this? And so it was very confusing. But it turned out to be a lot of fun. And I got to really kind of grow a little as a writer. You know, one of the stories I wrote in the first person, which I don't normally do. Another one, I wrote a love scene, and I realized that writing a love scene between two people who've been married for 20 years is very different than writing one where they're in courtship. And so that was very interesting. Yeah, so I just got to do it. It's nice because I got to play around with some different things that you don't normally get to do in romance novels. So I really enjoyed doing it.
That's amazing, because also, as I understand, you are writing the prequel of the Bridgertons right now. And how is that? I mean, how is like going back to that universe, for saying in a way, and taken back, and now with all the, I don't know, how do you say, the weight of the story that now Bridgerton belongs to the cultural world.
Well, I've actually already finished the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
So those have all come out. They're still coming out in Spanish, but they're all published in English. That was really fun. It was interesting because I think everybody expected me to write sequels. And instead I went with prequels for a couple different reasons. One of them was that I thought it'd be a fun way to show Violet and Edmund without actually making them the star of the story. And then I ended up not really doing much with them until the last book, but you know. And I also thought it was an interesting time period to go with. I wrote, one of them is actually set in the United States, which I've never done before because it was during the Revolutionary War. So it's set in New York. It's British characters, but in New York. But what was really fun was in the very last book, that is late enough so that Anthony and Benedict are young boys and Colin is a baby, and they show up. So you get to see these characters as small children. And by that time, when I was writing it, Bridgerton was already filming. And so these characters had been cast. And when I met Luke Newton, who plays Colin, I was telling him, I'm writing a book right now and you're a baby in it. And he sent me a baby picture of him, which was really fun. So I told you I'm not a very visual writer, but it was the first time I actually had a good picture of what the character looked like because I had his baby picture. He was very cute. It's on my website, actually.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you, how did you feel about these things that the series made different about the books? I mean, for instance, in the book, you never see the things about the other communities that they live in England at the same time. And in the Bridgerton, it's a very big subject. And I think it's also became a subject of what we are talking right now and how it's important to include that kind of characters. How do you feel about it?
I love the changes that they've made. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean like I wish I'd written the books that way, because I think books and film are very different and you can do different things in them better in one or the other. But I think that what they did in the television show is great. I love the casting. I think the people they cast are amazing. I love that they made it more inclusive. I think, you know, in some ways it's easier to do on film because it's visual. And so, for example, you know, you can not just the main characters, but everyone, the whole society. So like if I'm writing a scene where my main characters are walking down the street, I'm not going to describe every person on the sidewalk next to them. But on a television show, you see them. And so you could just make this more inclusive society more matter of fact. You don't necessarily have to say that much about it. It's just, okay, well, here are the people and this is what they look like. And that's that. Whereas I would have to kind of make a point of it in books. I love the addition of Queen Charlotte. She's not in the books, but she's in the show. And I think she's just, I mean, as she's written, she's amazing. And then they got Golda Rosheuvel in there to play her, who's just, I mean, she is the queen. So I love that. And then, you know, obviously in the books, Lady Whistledown is actually, I mean, she opens every chapter, but it's not as big a part of the books. And obviously they made it a much bigger thing in film, which I think makes sense. And plus you have Julie Andrews. But I think that really the biggest overall change is that in the books, each novel is very tightly focused on the main two characters. There's a big cast and people love the secondary characters, but you know, if you actually look at any of my books, you almost will never find a scene that doesn't have one of the main two characters in it. It's never seen between the other people. Whereas in the television show, you can sort of set a wider net. And so, you know, you get to know Penelope and Eloise a lot better in the show right away than you do, you know, in the series, you have to go farther into the series to get to know them so well. So I really love that they're able to kind of bring things forward and make the cast more of an ensemble right away. And I just, honestly, I can't think of anything I would change about the show. I mean, well, the one thing I would change is that moment in the beginning when Prudence faints. Mm-hmm. I wanted more of that because she's so funny. I mean, I wanted to see the whole thing. I wanted to see her going down. But I mean, if that's the biggest thing I want to change, then it's pretty amazing.
No, it's really pretty amazing. And I think also about the show, as you said, I love the friendship between Penelope and Eloise. And I think Eloise is such a strong character, mm-hmm. like a secondary character that we have to wait to see what is going to happen with her. But one thing that I really love about the show is that she thanks Penelope. I mean, like, mm-hmm. instead of having this kind of fight between sisters that, oh, you're so perfect and I'm not, it's like, thank God you are perfect, so I don't have to worry mm-hmm. to be mm-hmm. perfect. I think that was like a very nice thing about sisterhood that we need to see more in the television and also reading about it.
Well, it's very realistic. I mean, they are definitely, but I love the scene where Daphne grabs her hand. When Nigel comes and Daphne grabs her hand as if to say, don't leave me. And, you know, even though she, you know, is totally mocking her sister all the time for trying to find a husband, she's there for her, you know, until Violet kicks her out. Like, she's definitely going to stay. But, no, I feel like they got the sibling relationships, you know, very realistically, which is something I think people really like about the show a lot. I mean, obviously everybody loves the romance, but I think that, you know, we haven't all had that kind of romance in our lives, but most of us have had that kind of sibling relationship and sort of can really relate to it.
And also, I have to talk about the trauma in the series, because I start to see in TikTok this kind of videos that they were talking about the main character, that Rene. I just forgot his name, and they were saying like, no, this I'm seeing in Bridgerton because of the drama and mm-hmm. the photograph of Renee. And I was like, yes, I'm watching also because of that. But also, I think in one interview, you were talking about the scenes about the consents between them, mm-hmm. both of them. And I think it was very interesting the way which they bring their sexual relation to life, mm-hmm. because it was like super consent, super open, and also like it brings another kind of erotic energy that you have said that we have seen it from the man point of view, but now we see it from the women point of view, and it feels completely different.
It does. And it's, you know, it's really funny whenever somebody talks about Bridgerton, you know, in the newspaper, something, they're always like Netflix's raunchy show, the racy show, like they're always talking about that. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, it's not more explicit than all these other things you're doing. It just feels different and it's like something different, new and more because it's done in a different way. I mean, does it feel sexier because you have people who care about each other, because it's the sex is now actually meaningful and not transactional? I don't know. But yeah, it's funny, you know, people keep talking about how sexy it is and how racy it is. And I'm like, well, that's because suddenly instead of seeing like the women's boobs all over the place, now we get like the male tush, or butt. I don't know if you say tush in Spanish. So.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for seeing that kind of things, because mm-hmm. I was reading the first book with my boyfriend and I read some parts and we were like, just like, you know, like blowing, like, oh my goodness. And you know, like if you feel a little bit like a teenager, just like mm-hmm. laughing like a little bit. And I think it's great. Last question I have to ask you, that have you dressed in the Bridgerton fashion in the series or something like that? Are you going to do it?
I don't know. I'm not a costume person very much, although and people ask me, are you going to do a cameo, be an extra? And I didn't want to do it last season because to be an extra on the show, it actually takes a really long time. It takes several days because they have to get you ready. They figure out your look. They have to take all these pictures so they get it right, everything. And I wanted to be able to watch everything. But maybe for season 2, or I don't know, season 2, I don't know if I'm going to make it to the set because of COVID, but maybe in the future I will give it a try.
That would be great because we really want to see you dressed in Bridgerton fashion. And
my husband's like, he's like, we're going to do it. He's determined to get over and do it with me, which is funny because he's totally not, Mr. Fashion at all. But he's just like, I'm going over there. We're going to be in a dance scene. I was like, I don't think you understand. Like, you have to rehearse those dance scenes for like 2 weeks. He goes, okay, we're not going to be in a dance scene. We're just going to be walking down the street.
Well, maybe we can be in the dance scene, watching the dance scene.
Yes.
Maybe that would be great. Well, thank you very much, Julia, for your time and for your openness to talk about these amazing books that you have written. I'm already reading it and I'm very excited about it. And I just can't wait to Netflix to go out the second season and see what is going to happen.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye, Delio.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much for